Hello, Vertigo here again, and I have a lot to update about in the invertebrate room. I wanted to make update videos a monthly thing, but I kind of missed out on last month. Things got really busy and I was super stuck on the Fruit Fly 101 video, which took me the entirety of February and a bit of March to make, partly because I wasn't happy with how it was turning out. So today, we'll focus on my mantises. So I have some bad news. I did have some losses with my mantids. First off, I mentioned last time that I had bought 5 L1 Archimantis nymphs from a breeder in Perth. Unfortunately, of the 5, only one of them has survived to an L6 nymph. For those who aren't familiar with the L number system for mantids, the L number tells us what instar they are, which is the current life stage of the mantis. L1 is a newly hatched mantis nymph, and the number goes up every time the mantis molts. So an L6 mantis has molted 5 times. As to why the other mantis nymphs died, I think I know why. It was most certainly my fault. While it wasn't clear at the time, I'm quite sure that the original containers that I had them in had far too little ventilation, and I certainly learned the hard way from this experience. Some of the nymphs that had died were growing very weak, they were unable to molt, they had infections that made them throw up their meals, and shortly after all of this they would die. I've changed my setup to have much more ventilation, and hopefully in the future I won't have this issue anymore. As for the sole survivor, she turned out to be a very healthy female and is in a much better setup now. I haven't had any issues since changing things, and hopefully it stays that way. The losses don't stop there though. My lovely big lady, Nyx for Archimantis labrina, met a very poor end too. And you guessed it, it's my darn fault. If she were alive now, she would be a big, beautiful adult mantis, but she didn't survive her final molt. I made a big mistake and changed her hard mesh top to a fabric mesh top, thinking that she would have a better grip on the fabric instead of the mesh. My reasoning behind this was just paranoia. The last time I had a big female mantis, she fell during a molt and died. I knew that Nyx was going to molt within the next 24 hours, so I changed the mesh in hopes of better success. But the new fabric top was very flimsy, and Nyx was a very large and heavy mantis. In the middle of her night, while I was asleep, she fell from her molt. When a mantis molts, their outer skin, the exoskeleton, becomes very soft and vulnerable until it hardens back after the molting is complete. Mantises molt upside down to make things easier on their long bodies and legs. If they hang upside down, gravity helps their bodies stay in proper shape while they're still soft. If a mantis drops during a molt, it can seriously disfigure them, and at most times, it's a death sentence. Unfortunately, this is what happened to Nyx, and she wasn't going to be able to survive because she had dropped while she was still halfway inside her old exoskeleton, and by the time that I found her on the floor of the enclosure, she had already hardened in her new exoskeleton. Entombed in her molt, she had no way to move any of her limbs, climb, eat on her own, or even poop, because her limbs and hind end were still inside the molt. It would have been cruel to keep her alive, so I had to euthanize her by keeping her in a freezer. The worst part was how heavy her body felt in my hand. She was a large, heavy insect. After making sure that she had fully passed, I placed her inside this planted pot so that she could, in some way, live on as nourishment for the plant. I didn't film any of this because it was pretty personal to me, and part of me hoped that I could breed her with my other Archimantis labrina so that I could have part of her in her offspring's genes long after she would have died from old age. But obviously, due to mistakes, that won't be happening. On a bittersweet note, my false garden mantids, Beast and Beowulf, passed away from old age. Despite their slightly wonky legs, they were able to mate twice with no instances of cannibalism. Beast was able to lay multiple oofica. I don't know how to pronounce it, so we're just gonna have to go with whatever. But she had some very well formed egg sacs that I hope will mean another generation of nymphs from this particular pair. Beowulf, the male, passed away sooner because he was older and typically males don't live as long as the females. He has a place on my windowsill, buried in this pot right here. Beast passed away a little bit more recently, so I still have her body kept in my freezer to avoid decomposition. I'm also thinking of burying her in a plant pot, but I just haven't had the time to get all the things together for that. I'm not sure when the nymphs will be emerging from the Ufica. For this species, it could be anywhere between 1 to 2 months, though from what I also hear is that Ufica can sometimes go through diapause during winter and will hatch in spring. It's autumn here now, so that is definitely a possibility. Diapause is when development is paused for a period of time until conditions for survival become more ideal. An example of this is in many butterflies, where the caterpillars that become chrysalises in late autumn won't develop into butterflies until spring. So my mantis nymphs could be emerging any day now while it's still warm, or I might have to wait through the winter. That means right now in my invertebrate room, I have my unnamed L6 Archimantis girl, and Poppyseed the male Archimantis labrina, and a whole bunch of false garden mantis uficas. While it doesn't seem like there's much mantis action going on right now, I have to keep in mind that I have multiple uficas, and if they're all viable, I might end up having to take care of something like 100 false garden mantis nymphs. That's going to be a lot of time and effort, and I'll probably end up releasing some as they're actually a locally native species where I live. I will sell some to recoup the costs and time of raising them, and then I'll keep a handful for myself to raise to adulthood and breed. So there was some sad, and there was some good, and a lot of things were learnt in this short period of time. In the future, I will be once again expanding my mantis collection, but for the next video, we'll be focusing on the Neocaridina shrimp. That's it for now. I will see you in the next video.